Okay, folks, I'll admit it. The idea of a Walt Disney World Grand Prix on the Formula One calendar may seem preposterous on its surface. Dare I say, it may even seem comical. If you have any sort of basic understanding of either Disney or Formula One, then you know there are plenty of obstacles getting in the way of something like this ever coming to fruition. And you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. But I'm here to tell you, I truly do believe wholeheartedly that the pros outweigh those hefty cons. And the media partnership that F1 and Disney had signed in 2025 and are now putting into full effect starting this year, I think is going to give both parties a taste of what could potentially come if we do bring a Formula One track to Central Florida. So much so that, dare I say, I actually do truly believe this could come to fruition in the near future. But, folks, I can hear you now. How could I possibly be so confident in such a ridiculous claim when I've already conceded the fact that there are a ton of cons and things going against this? And the first of those cons, if you're familiar with the F1 calendar currently, is pretty obvious, right? It all has to do with location. There is already a Formula One Grand Prix in Florida, that being in Miami, Florida, just about 3 hours away from Orlando. If they did this, not only would it be the first time ever that F1 would have two races in the same state, but it would also be incredibly unprecedented in the sense that the United States would balloon up to a race count of 4. Las Vegas, Austin, Miami, and now we're talking Disney World. And that statement in and of itself might even be an automatic disqualifier because it's already kind of insanity. The United States already has the most races on the F1 calendar at 3. Ballooning that to 4 would be kind of wild when you consider there's only one other country in the entire world on the F1 calendar that currently has more than one race, and that's Spain. So just from a numbers game, it seems ridiculous to add another race, regardless of where it is in the United States, to this country on the F1 calendar. It just does not make any sense, except when you consider that the largest growing audience for F1 is the United States. That is the largest market that is currently growing massively for F1 that are going to be big spenders now, today, tomorrow, and in the future for years to come for Formula One. It's a market they've been trying to get in for years that ultimately NASCAR and IndyCar have dominated. And now they've had an opportunity over the past decade or so to sort of grow that market, and adding more races to the calendar in this country has been their way to sort of do it. Las Vegas and Miami were just added in recent years. So sure, it makes sense that F1 is going to go big into the United States and invest heavily in there, especially with new races and stuff like that. But is 3 enough? Again, as you mentioned before, there's only one other country that even has 2 with Spain. Everywhere else only has 1. Does it really make sense to continue to add more races here, or is 3 doing the job? I mean, certainly, there's no way to deny it, folks. 3 is doing a lot to help grow the sport in the United States. There's no denying it. However, what I will say is that if you bring a race to Walt Disney World, it will do what all 3 of those races are doing and then some, all on its own. What you have to understand is that Disney and Disney World are cultural phenomenons, not only in the United States, but worldwide. If you bring a Formula One race there, it not only becomes motorsport headline news, it becomes worldwide global headline news. And you will easily enough get people who have never watched not only F1, but any motorsport whatsoever tuning in to watch that event. Some may even come in person to attend it because it carries the novelty of the Disney brand and just, Disney World as a landmark in general, and elevates that race in a way that a city by itself simply can't. And combined with Disney's already in place infrastructure with their parks and entertainment districts and all this other stuff, they would undoubtedly be able to rival any other F1 circuit as far as being able to put on events that could sustain people, not just for a weekend visit, but for a week-long event of attending this race. Now, I certainly have a long way to go in swaying you here. This is just the first speed bump of many, but if you by any chance happen to be on my side right now, well, you may be very well thinking, well, hey, why don't we just get rid of the Miami Grand Prix? I mean, that's kind of the biggest hurdle that's getting in the way of blocking this from happening. That way we don't have 2 races in Florida. We still only have 3 US races on the calendar. And after all, the Miami Grand Prix is kind of that temporary ilk that we mentioned before, because it's literally built in the parking lot for Hard Rock Stadium where the Miami Dolphins play. It is by no means a standalone circuit like many others are on the F1 calendar. Not to mention, certainly very different than what the Disney World Grand Prix would look like, as that would be a much more permanent structure. Well, I like your thinking there, boss, but unfortunately, the Miami Grand Prix is actually the longest tenured race on the F1 calendar. It is set to stay until 2041. So go ahead and dash those dreams away. If we're going to do a Disney World Grand Prix, guess what? There's got to be 2 Florida races. However, there does not have to be 4 US races, because coming up for expiration in 2027 is the Las Vegas Grand Prix. It was only added a few years ago, but they just put it up for renewal this past year and only added on a couple years to it. And the reason for that is because the race has kind of had its fair share of issues. There's been a lot of literal bumps in the road and a lot of sort of safety issues that have happened. And it's not necessarily the strongest racetrack on the course by any means necessary. So it's safe to say that if those issues don't get sorted out, F1 may look to drop this in spite of how fun its novelty is of driving on the Las Vegas Strip. So though that does certainly present a possible opportunity, it also doesn't change the fact that we're still looking at 2 Florida Grand Prix, which in and of itself is pretty absurd. Or is it? Because keep in mind that F1 values a few things. One, they value attendance, they value eyeballs, and they also value making a lot of money, making revenue. But you want to know the third thing they value a lot? They value cost savings. Traveling across the world with these cars and these parts and all these people that make the wheels go round and round costs not only Formula One, but obviously each and every team a lot of money, as well as a lot of headaches having to travel long distances. Having the Walt Disney World Grand Prix on the calendar, ideally within a week of the Miami Grand Prix, would give teams an opportunity to have a short travel week where they only have to drive 3 hours down the road. Heck, they could take the Brightline train, or they could fly just about an hour. That would pale in comparison both in cost, time, and effort when it comes to traveling pretty much anywhere else in the F1 calendar, with the exception of maybe all of those countries in Western and Central Europe that F1 will commonly stack week to week to week in the middle of the summer, because the travel times between those locations is so quick and easy and relatively cheap compared to when they're flying from Australia back to Europe or Asia or any of these other places that they're going across literal oceans to get to these places. Having a quick and easy stop on the F1 calendar that's, in a location that's so close to an existing race would actually be seen, I think, in a positive light, not only by Formula One, but certainly by the teams. So honestly, it's pretty funny because the Miami Grand Prix, in a sense, is Walt Disney World's Grand Prix's biggest enemy. It's its biggest disadvantage, the fact that that exists and is on the calendar until 2041. On the other hand, it's also perhaps one of its greatest assets, the fact that it can be that easy pit stop on the tour that's only a 3-hour drive away. But here's the thing, we've spent all this time talking about whether or not it makes sense for F1 and if they would even want a Walt Disney World Grand Prix, but we haven't spent the time to talk about whether or not Disney is even interested in potentially doing this. I mean, after all, this is not Disney's first rodeo when it comes to bringing a motorsport circuit to Walt Disney World. They did it back in the 90s with the Walt Disney World Speedway. This was a circuit that was effectively made in collaboration with IndyCar, hosting several IndyCar races as well as a couple of NASCAR Truck Series races. It was constructed in a nearly 40-acre plot of land just south of the Ticket and Transportation Center, which is the parking lot for the Magic Kingdom for those unaware, and was used for several races between the late 90s and early 2000s. However, beyond that, it stopped being used for major races and was eventually closed in its entirety in 2015. So not only has Disney tried their hand in motorsport, but specifically Walt Disney World has, meaning that they've gone ahead and they've already put their hand in the ring with this, put money up front, and ultimately failed. If the track only lasted for 30 years and only held races for at best a decade, clearly it was not a worthwhile investment on Disney's behalf. So how can I possibly stand up here and say that Disney's going to go ahead and throw their hat in the ring once again and beat their head against the wall with something that's already proven to not work for them in the past? Well, folks, when we're talking about a permanent Formula One track, it is a very different venture than what the Walt Disney World Speedway was, because that was always set up as a temporary racetrack. The stanchions, the concessions, all that stuff was temporary and designed to just be up in the early part of the year for a race or two, and then taken down for the rest of the year to be used for excess parking for Magic Kingdom. The bottom line is the track was built cheaply and quickly and was not at all intended to be a permanent structure. They never signed a contract with IndyCar or NASCAR for a spot on their calendar or any sort of guaranteed races in the future. Everything was on a year-by-year basis, and when the Super Bowl came to Tampa in 2001, all of a sudden that scared off IndyCar and said, we don't want to have to compete with that, therefore we're taking this early January race somewhere else. And they were able to do this because Disney never cared or even attempted to get any sort of guarantees from IndyCar by signing a contract. And the reason why Disney didn't care or bother to do this is because building this track was always just kind of seen as a way to monetize parking for them, right? They knew that end of January into early February was a dead time of year for the parks. It was a dead time for tourism. So bringing IndyCar there into basically what was effectively overflow parking was a great way for Disney to make a little bit of extra dough at that time and then use that space as parking for when the peak season actually hit. So it's undeniable, the Walt Disney World Speedway was a failure, but it's also undeniable that the effort put forth by Disney was at best half-hearted. They did not try their best to create a world-class circuit or one that would stay on the calendar for years to come. If anything, they were expecting a one-and-done event, given the fact that it was temporary right from the get-go. So no, I do not see the Walt Disney World Speedway as an indictment against a potential Walt Disney World Grand Prix for Formula One, because a Formula One track would require much more investment and ultimately would have much higher expectations of modern day Formula One than IndyCar in the 90s had. If Disney wanted to build a Formula One track, not only could they not build it as haphazardly as they built the Speedway, but they also wouldn't build it that haphazardly because they would be looking to see a much greater return on the ultimately much higher cost of investment that a Formula One track would cost them. So when it comes to talking about this from Disney's perspective, to be completely honest, I do not even think the Speedway is a consideration at all. That previous failure is basically being thrown into a completely different bucket. It's pretty much not even a similar venture whatsoever in their minds. And with the Speedway not being an issue, it seems that Disney would be 100% on board with this. After all, we talked about that media partnership that they signed with F1, that they started off in such a grand way with Mickey doing his own kind of version of Fantasmic in front of the Bellagio with the F1 theme song and all this stuff for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. It was awesome. It was wonderful. And it's just kind of a taste of what's to come with that partnership that could also be a taste of what's to come with a potential Disney World Grand Prix and all the theatrics that could go on with that. But the fact of the matter is that the relationship between these two organizations might not be as hunky-dory as they may sound, because there actually has been another more recent development that has kind of soured relationships a little bit. That could be another major con in this ever potentially happening. And that's that ESPN, of course a network owned by Disney, lost the rights to be able to show F1 in the United States to Apple. Apple, of course, making a big push for the rights after the success of the F1 movie that they helped to produce and distribute. Now, if ESPN still had the rights and they were still showing these F1 races on national television, well, that certainly would have been a big positive for Disney, as it would have been seen as a major brand synergy moment to have Disney parks and a Disney race on Disney's own television channel in ESPN. Now that F1 has effectively told ESPN to go kick rocks, it kind of makes that a little bit less of an enticing thing to promote the F1 brand and to build that up and use that as your marketing platform when F1 seemingly does not want to work with you on a media distribution front. And even though the brand synergy part of this has been lost by ESPN no longer having those rights, it doesn't change the fact that Disney could very well still be very interested in this. After all, Disney has a lot to gain from hosting an F1 race every year. For one, as we sort of alluded to before, it would just be a massive marketing opportunity for Disney. It'd basically be a giant advertisement. The entire weekend of events would be a massive advertisement for Walt Disney World. And we already mentioned that, of course, F1 is trying to grow in the United States, but where they're already massive is in Europe. And European international visitors are among the most lucrative for Walt Disney World. They are guests that they really want to bring to the resort. One, because they tend to stay for a very long time, oftentimes up to 2 weeks, which is much longer than your average American tourist. And as a result, they end up spending way more money with Disney than your average typical tourist. So usually Disney really wants to attract to these people, and being a major, basically venue for an F1 race could be a great way to get in front of those audiences. And this is all without mentioning that, of course, the race itself would be a massive tourism draw. It would bring people from all over the world, not just the United States or Europe, but quite literally everywhere to Disney World for the event. And, listen, if you're flying in for an F1 race, chances are you got a lot of money. And let's be honest, too, a Disney World race in the calendar would be able to go for a boatload of money. I mean, the cheapest tickets for, I suppose, the most comparable race, which would be the Miami Grand Prix, are going for $670 for the 3-day ticket. That's right, $670 is the cheapest. Oh, and that's right, if you just want to see the race, it's $480 at the absolute lowest to go and see that race. So I'm telling you right now, you think that these are high prices? I think that Disney could command a much higher price than even this. But that's not even the main point here. The point is that you're bringing in super lucrative guests who have a lot of money, period, and would be willing to spend it at Disney, not just for the race, but also at the parks, at the resorts, at their shops and restaurants. And Disney could be making a ton of money off of high rollers that are coming in town for the F1 race. But here's the thing, folks. It all sounds nice on paper, but in order to make a lot of money, you gotta spend a lot of money. And when it comes to a Formula One track, that is no exception. As an actual from the ground up Formula One track could easily cost anywhere between $200 million on the absolute low end to upwards of $1 billion. I mean, after all, the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi cost $1.3 billion to build, so it's easy enough to see how this circuit would cost a tremendous amount to build as well. I mean, the only actual stand-up from the ground up circuit in the United States is the Circuit of Americas in Austin, and that was built quite some time ago, right? The Miami one and the Las Vegas one are using pre-existing infrastructure to be able to have these circuits be run, and as a result, be able to keep the costs down of building them. But in Disney's case, that really wouldn't necessarily be likely an option. I think they would actually have to build a circuit from the ground up, which one, would elevate its quality and its prestige, but two, would also cost Disney quite a pretty penny. But that being said, I think it's sort of undeniable they would actually get quite a bit of support, both potentially from the state of Florida, but also more than likely from the city of Orlando and Orange County, as their tourism boards would potentially be heavily on board with this, as they know it would bring in a lot of international tourists, which is a major marker for them, as their high above average per capita spending make them ideal candidates for sustaining Florida's tourism-based economy. So Disney almost certainly would not have to foot the bill entirely themselves. They would get some help on this, but it would still cost them quite a bit, but not as much as maybe it's cost some other people to build tracks like this, because Disney already has a lot of things going for it. In case you don't already know, Disney owns land the size of San Francisco in Central Florida. They have ample amount of land to use, and quite a lot of it that's actually suitable for development that would be perfect for a project like this. I'm thinking just north of the ESPN Wide World of Sports facilities, which is, of course, all about sports, is over 200 acres of land that is suitable for development that would be perfect to build a absolutely massive F1 track. Usually you're looking for, give or take 100 acres. Well over 200 would put you on track to be one of the larger circuits on the calendar. So not only would this save Disney money by not having to purchase land, but also they could use the facilities that already exist at the ESPN Wide World of Sports to help support this, both for events and for just general facilities and offices and restrooms and all this other stuff that can help to support the track that's just going to be right next door. So certainly not everything about this idea is perfect. It's not flawless. It's going to come with some drawbacks and some concerns. But if you're F1, you're gaining more notoriety and popularity, not only in the United States, but worldwide by having a Grand Prix at Disney World. And you're making a ton of money. You could easily enough be rivaling that of Las Vegas for a Grand Prix that's making you a ton of money in ticket sales. And it probably could very well be the most watched Grand Prix on the calendar in any given year. Not only that, but if this were to happen, Disney would be committing alongside the tourism board of Orange County and Orlando to bring in an actual world-class circuit that would be great to have on the F1 calendar. And if you're Disney, you're making a ton of money off of these big spenders coming to the race and staying for a long time and enjoying your amenities and offerings. But you're also really advertising and appealing heavily to those international European tourists that are so valuable and spend a ton of money throughout the year at Disney. And I would even say you're getting the added bonus of bringing more guests and making more use out of the ESPN Wide World of Sports facility that really, outside of hosting like high school Pop Warner events, is not necessarily getting the most mileage out of it nowadays. Adding an F1 track that uses those facilities would help to really make a better return on investment for that project as well. So it's certainly not a slam dunk, but folks, I have to say it is looking plausible, and I would dare say it could potentially be likely, given the current partnership between these two companies. However, and this is the biggest however I'm going to bring up today, folks, because we're not done here. There is one final boss to consider if you are F1 and Disney. Because, folks, there's someone you forgot to ask. It's not just Formula One and Disney making this decision. F1 has sponsors that they need to abide by. They pay the bills. They're the reason why F1 makes the money they do. And one of F1's longest standing sponsors is MSC Cruises, a somewhat direct competitor of Disney's cruise line. For that fact alone, MSC may object to this in some way, shape, or form. You may say, well, what does that matter? What does MSC's voice have to do with anything? Well, folks, MSC is one of the biggest spenders as far as any of the F1 sponsors. And this is very evident by their presence at the Miami Grand Prix, where they're even adding in this year a yacht club that they've basically paid for. That's going to be not only front and center, but also absolutely massive on this racetrack. As after all, MSC Cruises is massive out of Fort Lauderdale. They're massive out of South Florida. That is like their kind of home base of operations. So they probably had a lot of sway in bringing a Miami Grand Prix to the calendar. After all, they also are a major sponsor at Hard Rock Stadium where the race currently takes place. It's no coincidence, folks. MSC Cruises does have a voice and they have a lot of power. And they may see this as kind of something that's overshadowing the Miami Grand Prix, something that's kind of getting in the way, especially if it is going to happen within a week of the Miami Grand Prix. They might be like, all eyes are on Disney, and then very little people are caring about the Miami Grand Prix. It might make it a little less special. Plus, with this other Grand Prix happening at Disney World, it may mean that Disney's product is getting promoted ahead of theirs in a way. Obviously not directly, but perhaps indirectly because it's being hosted at Disney. Disney Cruise Lines ends up overshadowing MSC in spite of the fact that this is MSC's sport. This is they're a headline sponsor for this, and they could find themselves being overshadowed by their competitor simply because there's a race happening at one of their venues on the calendar. And if MSC objects to this, so much so to the point that they potentially put their sponsorship on the line and say, hey, if you add Disney to the calendar, we're dropping out as a sponsor, that might be enough for F1 to cancel any plans and to throw them out the window for a Disney Grand Prix if MSC makes an ultimatum like that. They cannot afford to lose a massive title sponsor like that. So does that mean that this idea is dead in the dirt and that this whole video has been just for nothing because MSC is going to come in and kill the pooch on this? Well, no, folks, because I actually do believe it or not, as crazy as to say that the Disney World Grand Prix would somehow actually benefit MSC Cruises as well. How? How could it possibly benefit them when it is literally promoting their competitor? It's because, guess what? MSC Cruises could still be a major sponsor at the Disney World Grand Prix, meaning that they could promote themselves in places they never were able to before. They can literally be promoting MSC Cruises at Disney World. Do you know how crazy that is? That's unprecedented. That would be something that is unbelievable to think that Disney would, in a way, be promoting their competitor on home soil. In literally the most magical place on earth, they are promoting a different cruise line. MSC would probably be licking their chops at the opportunity to be able to promote their cruise line to people who maybe have no idea that MSC Cruise Line even exists, or have only ever entertained the idea of doing a Disney cruise before. So this is kind of, in my eyes, a no-brainer, especially with MSC growing their presence at Port Canaveral, which is the closest cruise port to Orlando. It makes a lot of sense for them to go ahead and use this as an opportunity instead of seeing it as a threat, in order to promote their cruise line in territory that's really, Disney Cruise Line territory, right? So I know I gave you guys all a bit of a scare with that final boss, but I do truly believe MSC would be on board with this, and that we're all going to be a happy family so long as these conversations actually happen. And I do think that they will in the coming years, as it's inevitable given the success of this Disney partnership with F1. I think that it's only going to breed grander ideas and is going to make them all convinced that a Disney World Grand Prix just makes sense. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you're interested in hearing about other things that Disney could use with the ample amount of land that they have with Animal Kingdom in particular, click the video screen right now, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.